what it was really like in Ottoman Istanbul and more. The city settles like a cat beside the water. Across the Bosporus, domes breathe out the last warmth of the day, and call to prayer glides along rooftops in ribbons of sound. Lanterns glow in shop fronts. Steam breathes from a pot of chickpeas somewhere down a slope. The sea, patient and dark, murmurs to the stone quays. Istanbul is never truly silent, but it knows how to soften its voice after sunset. You can hear it, the creak of a moored boat, the soft clatter of copper bowls being stacked, the distant clop of hooves on damp stone. Somewhere a night watchman taps his wooden clapper to mark the hour, a hollow, reassuring sound that says, the streets are watched. Night is an order, not a chaos. We will move gently here. We won't chase battles or count the thunder of cannons. We are not in pursuit of shock. Instead, we will learn the city by its textures and its routines. We will smell the air, the tannic bite of sumac near a workshop, the sweet alleys around a halva cellar, the salt lingering on laundry lines. We will walk slowly, past timber houses with latticed windows, past fountains where someone has left a cup, past a fig seller who will still be there tomorrow, nodding and counting coins into a palm. The city you may know from maps, from triumphs and sieges, has another life, one lived in the small daily obediences that make a place possible. Tonight's journey is measured and human, a craft, a court, a mystery, and a council. First, we will descend to the vats with those who tan the hides that become belts, book covers, slippers, and saddles the objects that hold an empire together in 1,000 quiet ways. Their work is honest, necessary, and difficult. The hands that do it are rarely recorded, but the city relies on their patience. You will hear the scrape of a knife across flesh, the swill of water in a trough, and the careful arithmetic of a guild that regulates how, when, and at what price a hide is turned into something usable. There is stench. There is skill. There is community. There is fatigue. Later, we will step carefully and respectfully into the life of a woman whose name the city still repeats. Hurrem, known in some languages as Roxalana, first captive, then consort, then a figure of delicate influence at the very heart of power. We will tell her story slowly, without gossip's heat, noticing how each corridor, each letter, and each ceremony defined the narrow space in which she moved, and how she learned to enlarge that space. We will open doors that are often spoken of in whispers, the private, guarded apartments of Topkapi Palace. We all set aside the myths and the bright-colored inventions that have gathered around the word harem, and we will replace them with the quiet truths of rooms, rules, schedules, and the ordinary labor of extraordinary spaces. And we will end our night in a polished hush, the Divana Humayun, the Imperial Council Chamber, where the day's petitions arrive in tied bundles, where seals are pressed into wax, where routine protects its power, and power depends on routine. It is not thunderous, it is careful. A clerk clears his throat, a scribe sharpens his reed pen, a vizier lifts his eyes, and a city breathes between his inhale and exhale. But for now we begin where leather meets water. Find a comfortable place to rest. Breathe in, breathe out. Let the city become a tide around you, never still, but never violent. Tonight, Istanbul will be your lullaby, a litany of craft and ceremony, told one careful step at a time. When you're ready, we will go down to the river. Why it sucked to be a tanner in Istanbul, sensory-rich daily life. Before the sun reddens the edges of the domes, the tanner is awake. He lies on a straw mat in a wooden house that leans a little, as most houses in his quarter do. The air tastes of smoke, the last sigh of last night's brazier, and of leather that never quite leaves his hands, even in sleep. He rubs his palms together out of habit. The skin is rough, permanently scented with lime and bark and work. Somewhere, the call for the dawn prayer climbs the slope of the neighborhood. He sits up, finds the cool brass of a small ewer, and pours water over his fingers and wrists, his face and feet, washing not to erase the smell. That will not happen, but to greet the day properly. His name isn't written in chronicles, but you can give him one if it helps you know him. Call him Hassan. He is a deba, a tanner, one among many, part of a guild that knows his measure. How long he has served as apprentice, Jirak, when he became a journeyman, Kalfa, what he can charge for his labor, how many hides his workshop may process in a given season. He has a master, Usta, who is both a teacher and inspector, and a circle of brothers in the craft who will notice if he grows proud, stingy, or careless. The city's market inspector, the Motasib, can appear at any time to check the scale, the quality, the compliance with posted prices, NRH. To be small in a big city is to be held by rules. The rules, in turn, hold the city. Hassan steps into the lane. The wood under his feet has been smoothed by centuries of slippers and sandals. Downhill, always downhill to the water. The tannery stands where tanneries usually stand, near an edge where drains can carry away what polite noses prefer not to meet. In Istanbul, that means creeks that slip to the Golden Horn, or banks where rinsing is possible when the current is kind. Workshops clustered together, there is comfort in shared stench. There is advantage in a neighborhood of similar needs. Bark, lime, water, hides, hands. As he walks, the city opens shutters. A baker pushes a tray of rings into the hot mouth of a stone oven simmet, sesame freckled. Their smell kind and bright in the cool. A boy jogs past with a copper pot of milk swinging like a bell. They talk of bark deliveries, of a rumor that the Mutasib will walk the quarter this afternoon. To check a woman beats a rug at the sill, unrolling dust into new air. A cat performs an old, ambitious ritual of ownership over a doorstep. Istanbul is sewing itself awake. Hassan tucks a piece of bread into his sash and saves it for later. The tannery announces itself long before you see it. There is a scale to the smell. First, a sourness that rides on water. Then, a deep vegetable bitterness, the tannins. And under both, the animal, the reality of hides that used to be on bodies. The work is the art of transformation. Nothing is wasted if a city hopes to be wealthy. Everything that can be made useful is shepherded from one life into another. Hassan enters the yard. Pits sit like dark coins pressed into the earth, each with its own purpose, each with a memory of what it has turned. Some are chalky with lime for loosening hair. Some are gentle with bark liquor sumac, oak galls, acacia liquids the color of tea and tobacco that feed leather its strength and color. Some are just water clear at dawn, less so by noon. He greets the others. There is a small prayer, not long, more of a rhythm than a speech asking for steadiness, for patience, for good work, and no accidents. Workwomen in other trades may begin with songs. Here the beginning is the scrape, scrape, scrape of knives against hide on a beam. The tool is heavy, curved, and blunt at the spine. The beam is a sloped log polished by thousands of hides, Hassan braces his feet, leans his weight forward, and draws the blade along the wet surface. Hair comes away like the fur of a drowned animal. Fat flecks and tissue lift under the edge. The sound is not unpleasant. It is a steady percussion, a farming of the skin. This is the moment that makes people wrinkle their noses when they imagine his life. It is also the moment when skill matters most. Too much pressure, and the hide tears. Too little, and the future leather will keep unwanted remnants that will rot. The guild knows how to judge a good scrape. The master will run a thumb along the grain and know, as surely as a baker knows dough, whether the craft has been honored. Hassan has worked long enough that his hands understand when to ease, when to insist. When the de-hairing is done, the hides rest in lime, a chalky bath that finishes the loosening and opens the fibers. Later they will be washed and coaxed back from the lime, swelling in a softer solution so the tannins can travel properly into the skin. The workshop has its own recipe, every tannery does. The ratios of bark to water, the time in each bath, the number of times the liquor is refreshed. These are craft secrets, passed from master to apprentice with the gravity of a prayer. Sumac makes a supple, pale leather, kind for bookbinders and shoemakers who prefer a fine grain. Oak galls darken and strengthen. They bring a firmness a saddle maker will bless with both hands. Between the bits, men move like ants, quick, purposeful, unhurried. Hassan shoulders a dripping hide. The water runs off his elbows and darkens the dust where it falls. He owns 2 tunics for work. Both are stained the ancient colors of his trade. He rinses his hands in a trough and takes a bite from his bread. A neighbor offers a pinch of salt and a sliver of cheese. They speak without looking at each other, the way men do when a task has set their eyes to measure and habit. Prices. They talk about the Friday sermon and the cleverness of a line the imam used to explain a hadith. They talk about a child who will soon be old enough to carry small things from the tannery to the shoemaker up the lane. Guild life is protection and burden both. Protection, because no workshop can flood the market with cheap, hurried leather and spoil everyone's reputation. The noir, the posted price, is a promise to buyers and a boundary for sellers. If you cheat, you shame your teacher. If you are shamed, you lose customers. If you lose customers, the neighborhood suffers. The guild keeps a chest with fines, used for charity and for its own common needs. The chest has a key that 3 men must hold together. When disputes come, they go first to the guild elders, then, if pride insists, to the goddess court, whose records keep the city in a long ledger of grievances and settlements. A leather worker is not alone, but he is not free to invent himself anew each day. Burden, because protection feels like a hand on your shoulder when you would sometimes like to run. Near noon, the sun climbs to where the yard no longer offers much shade. The work changes, because a wise workshop follows the heat. Hassan moves to the vats where hides soak in tannin. He lifts one with a hooked pole, tests its pliancy between thumb and forefinger, then lowers it again with the gentleness you would grant a sleeping child. He stirs the liquor with the pole, setting the water to a slow, cinnamon-colored spin. It is not glamorous, but it is beautiful in its way. The swirl, the vinegar-sweet smell of plants and bark, the knowledge that time is your ally. Tanning is not conquered, it is accompanied. At the call of the midday prayer, tools rest in their own shadows. Hassan steps into a small, cool corner where a jug and a basin wait. Water over hands, mouth, nose, face, arms, hair, feet return to clean shapes after the embrace of work. He joins others facing the same direction. The prayer is brief, familiar, and shared. When it ends, a boy arrives with a tin pitcher of boza, the tart, lightly fermented drink that cools a throat. Someone tears another loaf. Someone else, blessed with a wife who is good at stews, produces a small pot whose chickpeas have surrendered to softness. They eat crouched, elbows on knees, talking about whether the bark supplier will cheat the measure if the guild officer is late. It is not profound. It is, in its way, holy. Back to the hides. Now the finishing tasks begin, the ones that will decide whether a customer smiles when he opens a bundle. Hides are rinsed in running water, a stream if the season is kind, a trough if not. The river is a partner and a threat. On some days it is clear enough that rinsing feels like kindness. On others, it carries the city's other labors and smells accordingly. The workshop maintains a small channel of its own to stage rinses and to keep the dirtiest stages away from the finishing. A boy empties and refills a trough with a rhythm that has its own music. There is dyeing, too, though some colors belong to other specialists. A pale tan is easy. A soft chestnut asks for patience. For the blues and greens that customers love, the tanner will send the leather up the hill to a dyer whose vats are blessed and guarded like a chapel. But he will apply oils and fats here, rubbing them into the skin with a cloth until the surface wakes to a low, even sheen. He will stretch and stake the leather, working it over a dull edge to soften it without tearing, coaxing flexibility, the way a baker kneads softness into bread. If you watch closely, you will see a man talking to a thing as if it were a companion. He will ask it to accept the gift he is giving, and he will know when it says yes. In the late afternoon, the Muhtazib appears after all, a man with eyes like measuring spoons and a ledger that looks heavier than it is. He walks the yard, glances at scales, tests the thickness of a finished piece, asks prices, and writes them down in a precise, indifferent hand. The workshop bends around him like reeds around a stone in a stream. Polite, steady, unsurprised, he finds little to fault today. The guild's officer nods as if this is only confirmation of what he expected, which it is. Inspectors are not loved, but they are an instrument of fairness, and fairness is a kind of love if a dry and careful one. By evening the yard's sounds gentler. The light turns a kind yellow, and birds investigate the edges of the roof with the curiosity of thieves. Hassan gathers scraps. Nothing is thrown away unless it truly cannot be used. Small pieces go to a bookmaker who lines spines and corners with slivers of strong leather. Trimmings become patches. Shavings can be sold for glue making, where the city performs another of its quiet transformations. He ties a bundle with the twine and balances it on his shoulder. On the walk home, the city has changed again. The smell of the tannery washes off your clothes only slowly, but the street smells are stronger now. Grilled fish along the shore, where men with hands like rope sell what the evening brought. Coal smoke from the baths, where the last customers of the day will sit in steam and let the weight of their hours fall off their backs. Hassan will go there once a week if he can afford it. On other days, he will scrub at home with hot water and an old cloth, and he will be clean enough for sleep and prayer, and one more round of sunrise. At a small fountain, he pauses. The basin has a cup chained to it. He drinks, careful to spill a little first, for blessing and for courtesy. A dervish passes, humming a tune that is half song, half reminder. A papermaker's boy rushes by, his hands inked black as the inside of a walnut. Someone haggles about onions. A donkey decides that tonight, this street is a good place to stand and think about donkey things. Istanbul smiles and shrugs, as it always does, and makes room. Home is a room with three things that matter: a place to sit, a place to lie down, and a place to keep the tools dry. Hassan eats a bowl of lentils and bread. He runs a stone over the edge of a knife, not to sharpen it to a hazard, but to keep its curve true. He oils a handle. He folds a cloth. The day has not been dramatic. It has been 100 small obediences to a craft that rewards patience. It has been in the way of honest work, both hard and exact, unfair in places. And at the end, enough. There is dying, too, though some colors belong to other specialists. A pale tan is easy. A soft chestnut asks for patience. For the blues and greens that customers love, the tanner will send the leather up the hill to a dyer whose vats are blessed and guarded like a chapel. But he will apply oils and fats here, rubbing them into the skin with a cloth until the surface wakes to a low, even sheen. He will stretch and stake the leather, working it over a dull edge to soften it without tearing, coaxing flexibility the way a baker kneads softness into bread. If you watch closely, you will see a man talking to a thing as if it were a companion. He will ask it to accept the gift he is giving, and he will know when it says yes. In the late afternoon, the Mu'tazib appears after all, a man with eyes like measuring spoons and a ledger that looks heavier than it is. He walks the yard, glances at scales, tests the thickness of a finished piece, asks prices, and writes them down in a precise, indifferent hand. The workshop bends around him like reeds around a stone in a stream. Polite, steady, unsurprised, he finds little to fault today. The guild's officer nods as if this is only confirmation of what he expected, which it is. Inspectors are not loved, but they are an instrument of fairness, and fairness is a kind of love, if a dry and careful one. By evening the yard's sounds gentler. The light turns a kind yellow, and birds investigate the edges of the roof with the curiosity of thieves. Hassan gathers scraps. Nothing is thrown away unless it truly cannot be used. Small pieces go to a bookmaker who lines spines and corners with slivers of strong leather. Trimmings become patches. Shavings can be sold for glue making, where the city performs another of its quiet transformations. He ties a bundle with the twine and balances it on his shoulder. On the walk home, the city has changed again. The smell of the tannery washes off your clothes only slowly. But the street smells are stronger now. Grilled fish along the shore, where men with hands like rope sell what the evening brought. Coal smoke from the baths, where the last customers of the day will sit in steam and let the weight of their hours fall off their backs. Hassan will go there once a week if he can afford it. On other days he will scrub at home with hot water and an old cloth, and he will be clean enough for sleep and prayer and one more round of sunrise. At a small fountain, he pauses. The basin has a cup chained to it. He drinks, careful to spill a little first, for blessing and for courtesy. A dervish passes, humming a tune that is half song, half reminder. A papermaker's boy rushes by, his hands inked black as the inside of a walnut. Someone haggles about onions. A donkey decides that tonight, this street is a good place to stand and think about donkey things. Istanbul smiles and shrugs, as it always does, and makes room. Home is a room with three things that matter: a place to sit, a place to lie down, and a place to keep the tools dry. Hassan eats a bowl of lentils and bread. He runs a stone over the edge of a knife, not to sharpen it to a hazard, but to keep its curve true. He oils a handle. He folds a cloth. The day has not been dramatic. It has been 100 small obediences to a craft that rewards patience. It has been in the way of honest work, both hard and exact, unfair in places. And at the end, enough. This is why it sucked, in the blunt language of titles that make people click. The stench that oiled itself into your hair, the burn of lime on your knuckles, the way your back spoke to you at night, the price you could not change, the visit from the inspector you could not refuse, the winter mornings when the water bit your hands and the hides felt like stones. But it also held what hard lives often hold: fellowship, ritual, the pride of doing something necessary and doing it well. A city needs shoes, straps, bindings, belts, bellows, cases, saddles. It needs leather that does not crack when it dries and does not sour when it rains. It needs men like Hassan, who learn how long to leave a thing in a bath and when to lift it out and say softly, "Now, lie back." Hear the scrape of the beam again, but make it slower this time, like a metronome for sleep. Imagine the vats as dark coins and the water as tea. Imagine a cat patrolling the yard with the authority of someone who has never once paid a tax. Imagine the river, dutiful and patient, carrying away what should be carried away, bringing back what should return. Tomorrow will be like today, and that promise is a kind of rest. Hurrem Sultan, gently retold, from captive to queenly influence. Begin by breathing with the city. Before her name is Hurrem, before letters carry her voice across borders, there is only the slow bobbing of a small ship in the Marmara, the dull glitter of scales on a fishmonger's barrow, and the soft thud of bales being lifted, lowered, and counted by men who have made a life from keeping track of other people's lives. The date is not important for sleep. Let the years blur into a soft line. What matters is that Istanbul, the capital of an empire that turns languages and loyalties into a long braid, welcomes and absorbs. She will be one of the absorbed. You may have heard her called Roxalana, a name Europeans gave her, as if to place her on a distant map they understood. In the palace, she will be Hurrem, the cheerful one, a name that suggests laughter, like sunlight on water. Before that, she is a girl taken from a northern borderland, delivered by routes that the wind knows by heart: steppe, coast, inlet, and finally the city where everything changes its name. Do not follow that journey with anxiety. Let it be a closed door, and let us open the next one gently. The palace that receives her is a world of rules that keep people from crashing into each other. The old palace, Eski Saray, drains and sorts. The new palace, Topkapi, receives the chosen. In those training halls where the air smells faintly of soap and wood, girls learn how to fold a garment so it holds its shape, how to walk with a tray so cups do not sing against the metal, how to keep silence that is not emptiness but attention. They learn the language, Ottoman Turkish, polite, layered. They learn to read some, to sew much, to observe always. They learn that power here has a texture linen, velvet, and paper, and that to touch it, you must first become invisible and exact. Hurrem learns quickly. The women around her notice. Not the flatterers, they have no rank here, but the ones who have nothing to prove. Senior attendants, the kind-eyed literate woman who oversees prayers, the woman who measures time by the laundry, the woman who chooses who will serve, in which corridor, on which day. Quiet excellence is a defensible form of ambition. Hurrem's laughter light, but not reckless, does not grate against the rules. It oils them. A door opens. Suleiman is not a myth doer. He is a man who prays at dawn, whose ink-stained fingers sign orders that leave the city as folded birds. He reads verses, writes poems, and hears petitions. His days are scheduled as tightly as strings on a rabab. When he sees Hurrem at first only as one sees someone who carries a tray, quietly and correctly, he notices the steadiness before he notices the eyes. The court is full of beauty. Steadiness is rarer. Slowly, a new geometry arranges the space between them. She becomes not merely present, but necessary. This is not the leap that gossip loves. It is a series of small, measured steps. She is taught to write letters as a lady of the inner palace should. Phrases that are gardens, with paths that lead to meaning without tripping over it. She is taught the habits of a consort, how to receive gifts, how to refuse them without insult, how to ask for a thing in a way that makes the asker grateful to have given it. She learns the book of the city by heart, its fountains, markets, guilds, and mosques, its names for the winds, its timetable of ships. When she bears children, the first proof of a place no rival can dismantle, the palace changes around her. There is an apartment, there are nurses, there are women with hands made gentle by years of bathing infants and of arranging soft turban cloths. There is also attention, which is both blanket and blade. She bows to the Valide Sultan, Hafsa, the Sultan's mother, who is at this time the mountain around which many currents flow. Hafsa knows what it takes to survive here without becoming stone. She watches the young woman who makes her son's expression soften. If Hurrem is wise, and she is, she gives the Valide the courtesies that seed trust. Not showy, not brittle, but exact. Letters begin to multiply like birds returning in spring. Hurrem writes to her husband when he is away on campaign, and the tone is not thunder, but low rain, steady, affectionate, threaded with small details that assure him the household continues as he would wish. She writes, too, beyond the walls. Polite replies to noblewomen who send gifts and later carefully phrased letters to rulers on the empire's borders, especially to Poland, Lithuania, where her remembered language curls at the edges of the page, like an old ribbon. The letters are not policy, they are courtesy, and courtesy is an oil for the hinges of history. Understand the limits and the lever. The harem is a household before it is a legend. The chief black eunuch oversees its gates. The matrons tend its order. The most senior women maintain a peace that is not always quiet. Hurrem navigates this with the grace of someone who knows that a straight line is not always the shortest path. She trains her eyes to read the room, who is wounded by an old slight, who needs a task to return a sense of purpose, who must be treated like an elderly auntie, even when their power has become mostly ornamental. She discovers that kindness, given without witness, can be a form of armor. She uses it well. Outside her doors, the empire keeps its ledger. Revenue comes in, judgments go out. Inside, she claims a different kind of authority, one that makes men comfortable pretending it does not exist. She asks the chief architect, a rising man named Sinan, about a bathhouse near Hagia Sophia, a gift for the city, water made into mercy. Plans are drawn, twin halls for men and women, domes that catch the day's last light, marble that holds warmth the way a memory does. The baths will bear her name. and her endowment will keep water hot long after her hands are gone. Charity becomes her signature, a soup kitchen in the holy city of Jerusalem, where pilgrims arrive with the souls made thin by devotion, a hospice for those who cannot walk as fast as the market demands, fountains that turn corners into oases. Each is a vakaf, a legal trust, lands, rents, and duties set aside, not as ornament, but as guarantee. The documents blossom in careful script. This field will pay for soap, this shop for lentils, this orchard for repairs to the roof. A woman who cannot sit in council finds another room in which to speak. There are storms, and she does not sleep through them. Succession is the palace's perpetual anxiety, a throb behind the walls like a hidden spring. A prince's face is a prophecy. A mother's smile is mistaken for a plan. Hurrem bears sons, Mehmed, Selim, Bayezid, Cihangir, and a daughter, Mihrima, whose mind is both quick and kind. There is another prince, Mustafa, born to Mahidevran, popular with soldiers, and loved by those who think he looks like the certainty they want. Rumors build scaffolds around every gesture. A letter becomes a ladder. A gift becomes a weight. Do not look for villains here. Look for rules of a game none of them wrote. The empire's law discourages the co-rule of brothers. It prefers singularity to division. The path to the singular is strewn with grief, an accusation of treason, a whisper that becomes a sentence, a tent by a campaign road where tears fall on hard-packed earth. Hurrem has been accused by many of making the storm. Others say she only built an umbrella while it rained. For sleep, we do not choose between those stories. We notice instead how a woman who has no seat at council learned to survive in a world where men take decisions and women live with them. Her daughter marries Rustem, a skilled administrator whose calm face is a locked door. This alliance, like all alliances, brings both shelter and new drafts of wind. Rustem's rise ties Hurrem to the world, beyond silk screens and lamps. It also paints a target where gossip can aim. She continues to do what allows her to sleep. She tends to work that no rumor can fully stain. The bathhouse opens with the steam that smells faintly of eucalyptus and lemon. Women emerge with cheeks like roses, and bones run through with warmth. In Jerusalem, the kettle is filled before dawn, and bowls are handed to hands that tremble with age. It is difficult to misread soup. Her days have a rhythm, not a plot. Morning prayers in a small, carpet-sweet room. The soft rustle of women's voices reading familiar chapters. Lessons with the children, where letters open to words and words to the world. A seamstress consults on a robe, the green of olives. A jeweler displays settings as humble as they are valuable. A note arrives from Mihrima. A verse, a small problem with a steward. A request to see her mother at the fountain in the second court when the shadows are long. Hurrem walks there flanked by attendants who know how to occupy space and deflect eyes without ever seeming to move. Suleiman grows older in a way that does not reduce him. He writes poetry under a pen name that few within the palace speak aloud. He looks at the city from the terrace and calls it by its name like a litany. He consults his grand vizier. He scans the rosters of regiments. He touches an inkwell with a finger whose skin is creased by years of decisions. With Hurrem, his face relaxes. They talk of small things, which are often where truth lives. The way the cypress shadows lean after rain. The ledger of a foundation that needs a new trustee. The cut of wool that will not itch. The melody of a new muezzin that keeps catching in the ear. He trusts her attention. She does not hurry his certainty. Illness comes as it does to all bodies that have spent many seasons in the world. The physicians are careful. The baths are warmer. The linens are changed more often. She does not rage against the closing of her days. She inventories them. There is a garden that needs replanting. There is a scribe who should be promoted. There is a girl in the harem who has the hands of a future mistress of textiles and should be apprenticed to the right teacher. She sends gifts to the holy cities, not as bribes, but as ballast dates, cloth, oil, and intention. A woman who spent her youth being moved decides where things will move next. When she dies, she does not leave the city. The city keeps her. A doom rises within the precincts of a mosque that crowns a hill the mosque of the man who loved, ruled, and outlived her. The architect knows how to make marble feel like patience. Inside, tiles the color of a deep sea reflect lamplight in a way that makes it look like dawn. Visitors come to murmur prayers, to ask that their own households might learn the art of balancing order and mercy. The charity kitchens continue to ladle. The bath continues to steam. The fountains continue to speak the small language of water finding a path. In death, as in life, Hurrem is easiest to misread if you hurry. Do not. Stay with the slow facts. A servant trained to precision. A consort who learned that gentleness can be a strategy. A mother in a palace where motherhood and politics could never be separated by a wall. A patron whose endowments turned coin into warm water and soup. The empire was loud when it needed to be. She was effective when she was quiet. Between those two, a city was held together. If you are still awake, let her day become yours. Imagine tracing with your finger the lines of her vakuf deed, the way each clause turns like a vine to clasp exactly what it needs. Imagine the steam on a winter afternoon within the bath that bears her name, the way a woman who has been in cold rooms too long feels heat walk back into her bones. Imagine a letter, folded, sealed, and sent northward, saying nothing dangerous and everything necessary, that peace is preferable, that trade should continue, that God sees what men forget. Imagine a mother's hand smoothing a child's hair before a lesson begins, for even princes learn fastest when someone believes they can. Hurrem's influence was not the thunder, it was the resonance after. It was the way a chamber remembers a song, Topkapi's harem, myth versus routine, spaces, rules, real rhythms. Begin with a corridor. It is narrow enough that voices become gentler without being told to hush. On one side, a grill of gilded lattice breaks the morning into small, moving tiles of light. On the other, a lime-washed wall holds the cool of the night a little longer than you'd expect. The floor is stone, worn soft by tread, and the air contains those smells that define a household more faithfully than any inventory. Soap, warm linen, faint rose water, lamp oil, and where the corridor bends, the ghost of steam from a bath that has just been stoked. This is the golden road Alton Yol Topkapi's most whispered about passage. In paintings and novels, this corridor becomes a myth, a river on which perfumed intrigues float by. In truth, it is simpler and more human, a protected artery linking the Sultan's private apartment to the heart of the inner household, where women and children live, learn, keep order, and keep time. Layers of paint, touch-polished wood, and deep blue tile speak of years. Attendants step aside for their seniors in a quiet choreography of rank, learned young and practiced for life. No one hurries. Hurrying is how one forgets details, and here details are the hinges of everything. To understand the harem, Step out of the story others told about it, and into the rooms that made it possible. The people, not the caricatures. Forget the postcard vision of languid women idling among cushions. A palace is a workplace. The harem is a household whose members' lives are defined by tasks, schedules, and expectations so clearly etched that they become second nature, exactly the kind of certainty that helps a city the size of an empire keep its balance. At the summit stands the Valide Sultan where she lives. Her apartment is an axis. Below and around her are the Haseki, chief consort when one exists, the Kadin, officially ranked consorts, and a hierarchy of attendants, Hazinadar, stewardesses, Kalfas, senior attendants, instructors, and Ustas, masters of crafts. Younger women arrive as pupils. They are trained in the language and religion of the court, in literacy, music, needlework, and the manners that are a currency in themselves. Some will marry men of rank and leave the palace with a dowry, becoming nodes of loyalty across the capital and the provinces. Some will serve at higher levels within. A very few will become mothers of princes, a path that reshapes their rooms and responsibilities. The palace keeps meticulous Kayat records of who is who, where they come from, what they can do. A person is seen here as a sum of competences. The Kuslar Asa, the chief black eunuch, is both gate and bridge, guardian of the harem's doors, manager of communication between inner and outer courts, superintendent of certain pious endowments, Vakuf, whose revenues nourish kitchens and fountains in holy cities far away. Under him, ranks of eunuchs take posts at thresholds, carry messages under seal, and make sure that who should not meet does not, and who must meet does so at the right hour with the proper salams. Their quarters frame the first courtyard, like parenthesis, and their walking is the sound of rules, not threat. Scribes, yes. Inside the harem sit at low tables with reed pens that drink ink the color of figs. Accounts are kept, letters drafted, inventories updated. The harem is not a dark secret. It is an office with curtains and stricter proprieties. From time to time, a qadi, judge, or palace official will witness and register documents relating to marriages, manumissions, or endowments. Order is not a rumor here. It is ink. There are craftswomen, embroiderers who turn silk into architecture on cloth, quilters who make winter feel less like a sentence, women who piece together costumes for festivals and store them in camphor-scented chests, music instructors who tune the young to oud, nay, and voice, teachers of recitation whose palm can find a slip in tajweed by ear. And there are the invisible experts without whom cooks cannot cook and baths cannot steam, water carriers, fuel porters, sweepers, washerwomen in the laundry halls where steam turns speech into mist. This is not idleness. It is a tightly woven fabric of labor, the architecture of seclusion and care. Think of the harem as a nested set of courtyards, each with its own temperature and character. The outermost threshold, as you enter from the sultan side of the palace, opens into the courtyard of the black eunuch's quarters and duty posts of the Kuslar Asa, the chief black eunuch, and his corps. These men, trusted guardians brought here as boys and trained into a lifetime of administration and watchfulness, are the gatekeepers of rules everyone already knows. Their presence does not feel like a fortress. It feels like a reminder. A palace functions when people behave as expected. Turn inward and you reach the courtyard of the concubines, a rectangle of light where laundry lines sometimes echo like pennants, and where the day as first chores make a soft domestic music. Brooms, water poured from a copper ewer, a door closing with felt at the latch. Here are dormitories and schoolrooms, narrow stairways and cupboards with the miniature perfection of ships. There are instructors, Kalfa senior attendants, and Usta masters who oversee reading, writing, arithmetic, Quranic recitation, music, needlework, and those courtesies that oil the gears of a court. How to greet, how to serve, when to look down, when to meet a gaze, how to carry a tray. So 2 cups spaced exactly apart. Ring once, lightly, and not again. A little farther, this inward flower opens to the Queen Mother as sweet, the Valid Sultan, as apartments which look out toward both the sea and gardens. The rooms are tiled like water in summer light, Isnik blues and whites with tulips, hyacinths, and cypress motifs, repeating like prayers that never wear the lips. Carpets soften the floors, lamps lower the ceiling to a human scale when night falls early in winter. The Valide's presence forms the harem's moral climate. She is part administrator, part grandmother, part memory. The chief stewardess, the Hazinet Usta, keeps ledgers of textiles, gifts, salaries, and stores. Nothing leaves or enters without a signature, and those signatures are lines of calligraphy whose calm is a form of authority. There are baths, halls of warmth, domes pierced with little glass eyes that let the day in as milk-soft discs of light. Marble benches remember every spine that has leaned there after a week of rigid posture. The attendants telex us how to pour water at the right temperature, so the skin sighs but does not startle. Smells here are simple and pure. Olive oil soap, a citrus peel cracked between fingers, laurel leaves steeped in a copper pan. In the Kulan, the furnace room, stokers feed the belly of the bath so the upper rooms can ease themselves. Fire and steam, labor and leisure. Every comfort upstairs has its cost below, and the system functions because everyone knows and honors this exchange. The Imperial Hall is the harem's formal art, a high space with galleries where musicians can sit unseen, and where the Sultan, on those occasions that require it, receives within the family sphere. In daily life, it is more often a place of lessons, quiet inspections, and those small celebrations that mark cycles the city shares. Ramadan nights, haloed with extra lamps, the gentle aftermath of Bayram when sweets linger in bowls, the circumcision festivals of princes viewed through delicate grills as processions unfurl in the outer courts. Myth wants spectacle. Routine gives you ritual, which is better for sleep and for truth. A day that refuses the myth. The day begins before the sun asks permission of the sea. Dawn prayers gather the household into a shared breath. Some women pray in a small mosque within the precincts, others in their rooms, carpet edges aligned toward the Qibla. Afterward, there is a quiet hour that belongs to washing, to braiding hair, to changing bed linens and folding them with a precision that satisfies the eye. Breakfast is light. Bread sometimes rings of simit sent in from the outer kitchens. White cheese, olives, a dish of honey, a few walnuts, tea or milky coffee depending on the habit of the room. Lessons follow. Young girls repeat letters after a gentle voice. Older ones copy verses onto burnished paper. Needlework classes lay out silks like a painter's box. A music master demonstrates a makam and explains, with a patience that feels like kindness, why a certain turn in the melody always seems to settle the heart. In a corner, a writing mistress corrects a hook here, a spacing there. A letter must be beautiful, even when only a few will see it. You may have heard that women here were denied knowledge. That is a myth. The palace needs capable women, and so it makes them. Midday divides the hours like a fan opening. Prayers again, then a meal whose modesty is partly piety and partly prudence, stewed lentils with browned onions, rice, greens wilted with garlic, and a plate of dates. From time to time, sweets, soutlash, rice pudding, perfumed with rose water, helva with pine nuts. Candied orange peel appears in a small bowl, and someone laughs when a younger girl tries to take only the syrup, leaving the peel to shine like lacquer. Work returns. The laundry hall is at its liveliest now. Steam rises in veils, and the rhythm of beating cloth sounds like distant drums. In the baths, not every day but many, the routines of warmth and cleansing unfold like a slow book. The coarse cloth that removes old skin, the warm water poured so it never shocks, the massage that lengthens a spine that has held itself upright too long. The bath is not decadence here. It is sanitation and a social treaty, a space where rank relaxes a finger but does not drop the cup. In the afternoons, the valide receives or inspects, or simply walks through her rooms. Like a gardener who knows where each vine is headed, she will hear a stewardess's report on the stores. Silk, cotton, wool, camphor, rose water, beeswax for candles. Approve a marriage for a woman who has served a certain number of years and is ready to leave the palace with a husband of respectable service. Sign a document about a fountain whose stonework needs attention before frost. She is not a mythic matriarch. She is a chief operations officer in a world that names such work with domestic words. Sometimes the Sultan visits the inner apartments. The corridor prepares mats straightened, lamps topped up, a carpet beat once more, then laid so the pile sits the same way throughout. The women whose duty is to serve on such days are not ornaments. They are professionals. A tray arrives bearing coffee so black it contains night. Cups are spaced, saucers warmed. Conversation is ritualized by rank and by affection both. The younger children make their brief appearances, eyes searching faces for permission, the way all children do, and then are guided back to tutors. A household is both display and privacy. The secret is knowing when each serves the other. Toward evening, the harem quiets into the particular peace of a place that has expended its energies well. Lamps are lit. The wicks are trimmed to that length that produces a steady flame and no smoke. Someone reads aloud in a patient voice. Someone embroiders a border that will take a winter to finish. Someone copies a recipe for syrup to be kept against coughs. The call to prayer outside is answered inside by soft rearrangements. Slippers placed neatly, a tray of cups lifted and carried to the scullery, a window pushed open to let night air exchange with the days. This routine is not the story people travel to hear, and yet it is the story you can trust. It is how rooms propose a shape for lives, how institutions survive centuries, how a city's tenderest center remains both secluded and connected to the body that surrounds it. Gates, rules, and the safety of predictability. Who enters? Almost no one you may imagine. The harem is not a parade ground for visiting dignitaries. Its doors are policed by custom before they are policed by men. Male outsiders do not wander here. Women of the court, staff, children, the sultan, princes, and the eunuchs assigned to duty populate the rooms. Letters reach in. Gifts pass through under seal. News filters softly. The Kızlar Ağası holds the keys, literal and figurative, to pathways between inner and outer. When a petition from within must reach the Sultan or the Grand Vizier, it does so with ceremony, logged in a register, carried by one who will be asked to repeat exactly what was said to whom and when. The rules are less exotic than people wish. Schedules, modesty, deference, exacting cleanliness, and the constant awareness that one's actions may set a pattern for someone watching. Punishments are administrative, not theatrical. A girl who breaks a rule may lose a privilege. A woman who causes disorder may be reassigned. Manumission is not a fairy's wand. It is a legal act recorded by a kata and accompanied by a dowry if the woman has served well. The harem's justice, like most justice, is imperfect but legible. Privacy is a resource. Windows have lattices not to make women invisible, but to allow them to see gardens, courtyards, the shimmer of water between cypresses, without being seen by those to whom they are not related. The lattice is a technology of safety, as much as a symbol of seclusion. It frames the world like a painting, encourages contemplation, and reduces noise. If it is also beautiful, that is because beauty here is expected to work for a living. Festivals, seasons, and the soft tilt of the year. Ramadan nudges the household into a different rhythm. Pre-dawn, suhoor, taken in rooms made tender by lamplight, late-night readings. A little more humor in the afternoons, when hunger makes the serious feel silly, and the silly feel wise. Bayram brings new garments, the rustle of silk at the ankle, the crispness of cotton cuffs, the smell of new leather slippers. The kitchen's outer palace, not within trays whose neatness has its own theology. Sweets aligned, nuts like a little constellation, sherbets that catch the light like stained glass. In winter, braziers anchor rooms with islands of warmth. In summer, windows are propped to invite breezes that carry salt from the sea. Spring means tulips everywhere on tile, on cloth, and in vases. Because the city likes to mirror its own name in petals, autumn is the season of careful storage. Textiles eased into chests with lavender and camphor. Woolen blankets aired in the last strong sun. Ledgers turn to a new page with a prayer for abundance and for peace. The harem is not suspended above the city's life. It reflects it, slows it, and translates it into domestic key. Myth versus routine, point by point. Myth, a place of idleness. Routine, a school, a workshop, an office, and a home. Schedules, instructors, ledgers, inspections. Myth, a den of jealous intrigues. Routine, hierarchies reduce chaos. Senior women manage conflicts. The chief black eunuch enforces boundaries. The valide's authority settles most things without drama. Myth, a prison of ignorant captives. Routine, education is foundational. Literacy is cultivated. Many women leave to marry with dowries and positions in respectable households. Myth, endless feasting and luxury. Routine, plain meals most days, sweets on occasions. The bath is hygiene and social glue, not wasteful excess. Myth, constant access to the Sultan. Routine, access is ceremonial and scheduled. Most days pass without a royal appearance. Work continues regardless. When you trade myth for routine, you do not lose magic. You find a quieter, more endearing kind. The magic of competence, of tasks done well in rooms that are clean, safe, and peaceful. The harem's greatest secret is that it functioned because the thousands of small, ordinary acts were performed predictably by people who understood that their predictability was a kind of love. A last walk at night. It is late now. The golden road is gone from corridor to ribbon of shadow. A lamp makes a small island around the night, duty post of a eunuch, whose eyes do not miss much, and whose footsteps barely speak. The baths breathe warmth into the hallways. The laundry is finally quiet. The ledgers are rolled closed. The last tray of cups returns to the scullery with a porcelain hush. A breeze comes off the Bosporus and threads through the lattices. Somewhere, as always, a cat announces itself to a cushion and is forgiven at once. Stand a moment in the Valle des Salons with the lamps lowered. The tiles shimmer like a dream about water. If you look through the screen toward the outer courts, you can see the faintest glimmer where torches might still be passing near the kitchens. Think of all the doorways between you and that light, each one an idea about how to keep a family safe. Think of the women who learned to read here and then read ledgers no one else could balance. Of the girls who grew into wives whose households would mirror this order in miniature. Of the letters that went out from these rooms, folded like swallows, and flown on the backs of men who respected seals more than swords. The harem, like most things worth believing in, becomes clearer the longer you sit with it. Stay a little longer. Let the oil in the lamp finish its last appointment with the wick. When you go softly, and take the rhythm of this place with you. Not scandal, not spectacle, just care organized into rooms. Morning with a grand vizier, petitions, the divan, and ceremony begin before the doors open. The grand vizier, as chambers, are quiet in that devoted way of rooms that rise earlier than the sun. Coals wink under ash. A copper ewer sits in a bowl, its neck beaded with dew from water drawn in the night. Ablution. First hands, mouth, nose, face, arms, head, feet. Because a day that will touch other lives must begin with a touch of order. The carpet's weave gently presses itself into the knees. The prayers familiar, the syllables slow and even, like knots in a rope you trust with your weight. When he stands, the day stands with him. His attendants move as though the floor has taught them where to put their feet. The vizier's robe is lifted and eased onto his shoulders, not ornament, but uniform, a statement of service more than pride. Silk that doesn't shout, wool that remembers winter, a sash that can hold tools a clerk might envy more than a soldier. Seal case, small knife, folded paper, reed pen wrapped in cloth. Someone offers a dish of thick, sweetened coffee, the first weight in the stomach that will see him through the first tide of petitions. He drinks half, nods once, and steps into the corridor where a breath of dawn from the sea cools the lamps. Down a passage that runs like a vein along the palace's edge, past a courtyard where cypresses draw their needlework against a lightening sky, and into the second court, the great lawn where day after day the empire rehearses its composure. The kitchens on the right are already awake. Their chimneys make low statements to the air. On the left, the council chamber, the cupi alta, under the domes, sits like a low, thoughtful forehead, with 3 rounded thoughts behind it. Guards at the threshold bow, not with surprise, this is what mornings are for, but with the gentle respect a schedule deserves. Inside, the first sound is paper. It is the hush of reed pens being tested on scraps, the faint hiss of sand poured in a thin line to dry a sentence, the almost inaudible thud of a clerk as palm on a ledger to keep the page from turning off its own mind. Scribes are arranged along low tables. Their knives are sharp for trimming nibs. Their ink is the color of heat-stunned figs. In a niche, a brazier nurses a coal, and a pot keeps wax willing. The Nishanshu, the chancellor, sits a little apart, his instruments like a physician's. Compasses, a thin ruler, sharpened pens, reserved for drawing the imperial tura, the Sultan's calligraphic signature. He will not use them yet. First comes listening. The viziers arrive in order, silk whispering against wool, steps measured to the rhythm of a place that believes time is a ladder, not a river. The Defterdar, treasurer of the empire's revenues, brings books whose bindings are both handsome and stern. The Reis-ul-Kutab, chief of the chancery, bearer of foreign letters and the neatest repertory of diplomatic phrases in the city, sits with a portfolio whose leather remembers many hands. Ah, officers of the janissaries, of the cavalry with faces that say, steady, even when the news in their pockets says soon. The Kapajabasha, chief of the gatekeepers, organizes the flow of bodies so that the room never seems crowded, only purposeful. The Grand Vizier takes his place on a low carpeted bench beneath one of the domes. The cushion holds him without enveloping. The back of the seat reminds him of weight, not comfort. He greets each man with the kind of minimal courtesy that keeps mornings from becoming festivals. The ceremonial greeting is not a wall between them. It is the step that allows them all to stand at the same height. The doors open fully. Petitions enter like folded birds with stories on their wings. Ards Mazar, written in careful hands, sometimes by the petitioner, often by a friend or neighborhood scribe, each tied with a plain thread, sometimes sealed with wax whose impression is a ring or a borrowed stamp. A clerk receives them, records their arrival in a register whose columns assure the city that forgetting is not an official policy here, and places them in bundles. Each bundle is a knot of hope, grievances against a corrupt tax farmer, a guild's protest about an undercut price, a widow asking that a judge revisit a decision, a village headman narrating the damage last spring. Flood did to a bridge the imperial courier depends upon. The empire is large. The council is a listening device pressed to its chest. The first bundle is for market matters, because mourning belongs to trade. The Muhdisib, the market inspector, has issued a reprimand to certain bakers who shaved weight off bread while charging the full nar. He proposes fines. The guild replies that flour shipments were late and dear. Evidence is read out in a voice that is trained to be both audible and unexcited. The Grand Vizier asks 2 questions, both about weights and delivery notes, and then another, softer one, whether the poor quarter near the docks has received its usual allotment from the soup kitchen this week. Order is not only founded on penalties, it is also sustained by avoiding hunger. A scribe writes, the Nishant notates where a firman of formal order will be drafted. Next, a file from the Anatolian provinces. A village complains that their multazim, the tax farmer, has demanded levies beyond the schedule posted in the Qada's court. The Defterdar's finger moves down columns like a sparrow on a branch, hopping from number to number without falling. He confirms the rate, the grace period, the arrears. The Grand Vizier does not wag a finger or make a speech. He orders an investigation by a neutral official from the neighboring district and instructs that the tax farmer S. bond be reviewed. The point is not fury. The point is friction reduced. In this room, anger is mostly a waste of time. A frontier report arrives. Raiders on a border where the map makes shaggy promises. The Janissary Aga wants men. The treasurer wants receipts. The Reis-ul-Kutab wants to avoid a letter from a foreign envoy that begins with regret. The Grand Vizier listens until the noise of unstated positions reveals itself as pattern. He approves a small, immediate reinforcement, orders a letter to the local cadi to reassure the market, and instructs the chancery to prepare a careful note to the neighboring governor, invoking old agreements and the road that both sides pretend is older than their tempers. The council is not a stage for heroics. It is a workshop for consequences. Under the next dome, while this unfolds, scribes extract earlier decisions from a chest whose keys belong to two men who never traveled together. They lay out precedents like a physician's casebook, a ruling from 22 years ago about mill rights on a shared stream, a decision on whether a guild may expel the master for cheating apprentices out of wages, a clarification of inheritance when a man dies with two households whose peace depends on both being recognized correctly by the law. The Grand Vizier's face does not change when he reads. Practice makes you quiet. Between bundles, the door near the Ainalik pavilion, the little window is said to reflect more than it reveals breadth. The Sultan seldom sits among them now. He observes sometimes from behind a lattice. More often he waits for the delis, the digest the Grand Vizier will bring to him after the session. The possibility that eyes might be watching makes the room careful without making it fearful. If a spoon falls from a tray in the kitchen beyond, the clatter is a brief bell, and then the sound is paper again. An ambassador's gifts list appears, a preliminary inventory before the formal audience later in the week. Velvets from Venice, silvered glass, a clock whose face is new enough to cause both amusement and suspicion. The Reis ul Kutab suggests polite phrases that accept without obligating. The Grand Vizier circles two items, a medical treatise and a set of maps asking that they be reviewed by palace experts. Beautiful things delight, useful things serve. A matter of appointments comes to the table. A provincial judge has died, his successor must be named. The Nishanshu proposes a candidate whose handwriting is good and whose judgments, copied in court registers, show a mind that avoids both cruelty and softness. A note from the Grand Vizier's own network says the man is patient in listening and brisk in writing, a good combination in a court where men grow old, waiting to be heard. The Grand Vizier nods. A berat, a patent of appointment, will be drafted. The Nishanshu pulls a fresh sheet and marks where the Tura will sit, a crest of ink that says in a breath, Sultan, son of Sultan, master of many realms, magnifier of the law's mercy. Time steps forward with its modest shoes. From the imperial kitchens comes the council meal, not as feast, but as confirmation. A cloth is spread, copper trays placed, a soup that balances sour and warm rice, that holds its grains like a promise-kept lamb, stewed with prunes, until the meat remembers it was a cloud, once cucumber yogurt that cools well-trained tongues. They eat without speech, not because they disdain conversation, but because a day that speaks too early loses its accuracy. Eating together tells the room that they are a body as well as a mind. After the meal, the divan continues with individual petitions, sometimes read aloud, sometimes handled at the clerk, as table, where a man stands with his cap in his hands, while some part of his life is turned into lines of neat script. A widow asks for the enforcement of a dowry. A guild requests permission to establish a new Kethuda, their steward. A caravan master describes bandits by the bend of a river, where reeds grow tall as men. Each story comes with its own weather. The Grand Vizier gives each enough time to show its true shape, then returns it to the machinery that can act. The court treasury, the provincial governor, the scribe who transfigures talk into decree. Someone mentions Ulufa, the quarterly pay for the Janissaries due soon. The Defterdar's men will prepare the rolls. The coins will be weighed, counted, and recounted, until even the counters sleep with numbers pecking at their dreams. The day of payment is a ceremony and test both. Troops line in the second court, the trays of coin gleam, and the smoothness of distribution becomes a public statement about competence. The Grand Vizier notes 2 small adjustments to reduce the jostle at one gate and to prevent the coin bearers from bottlenecking near the fountain. Nothing grand, the kind of thing that keeps a day from turning into a story people tell for the wrong reasons. When the council's public session ends, the room exhales. The scribes blot, stack, and tie decisions into bundles that will be shelved in a chamber as dry as careful housekeeping can make it. The Nishanja draws the first tura of the day. Reed pens scratch in a way that could sedate a horse. A clerk warms wax. Another folds a document in thirds so that the seal will fall on the exact middle, not by chance but because the law deserves right angles. Then comes the quietest moment of power. The Rs, the presentation. The Grand Vizier crosses the court to the audience chamber, a square cooled by thick walls and brightened by tile, whose geometry keeps even restless eyes content. Outside the door, he removes his shoes. Inside, he bows deeply, habit turning reverence into something lighter than fear. The Sultan sits not as a conqueror, not today, but as a steward, because mornings like this are for stewardship. The Vizier presents the carefully prepared digest of what the council has heard and what it proposes to do. He does not flood the room. He streams it. He begins with market matters, then petitions that cannot wait, then appointments, then news from borders, then diplomatic arrangements. He is not surprised. He asks for confirmation where law and precedent invite it, for correction where the Sultan's judgment would be better than his own, for signature where only the Tura can make ink into action. Sometimes the Sultan asks a question that a man could miss if he were tired. How many bakers were fined? Not because he tips for numbers, but because numbers wake the truth. If the number is high, the flour story is thin. If low, the inspector may be making an example. Or, did the widow have witnesses? A question tied to God, because in law, remembering the unstrong is a form of worship. Or, send me that map, a curiosity that has built fleets. The Telis is approved with a small gesture, a low word. Later the documents will return to the Nishansi, who will draw the Tura with a hand that would not tremble if a thunderclap happened directly above his head. The Chancery will copy, summarize, and send. Couriers will take the roads with pouches that hang against their ribs like careful birds. In distant towns, a Kada will unroll a decree. A steward will nod. A scribe will reach for his pen. The empire is an ecosystem. What is said in this small, tiled room becomes the day elsewhere. Back in the council hall, the last tasks of morning tidy themselves. A clerk closes the register with 2 palms and ties it with a ribbon whose knot sits exactly where it should. The Defterdar gathers his books. His assistants carry them like sleeping children. The Re'ar is Ul-Kutab tucks letters into a wallet that will not leave his body until ink becomes an audience in another building. Guards shift their weight the way trees do, almost invisibly. Someone snuffs a lamp with a bell that denies the flame air and ends it without smoke. The room's scent now is wax, paper, and the faint trace of stew that met its purpose and went. Outside, the Bosporus has brightened into polished steel. Pigeons write small, quick sentences around a cypress, and then forget what they were saying. In the kitchens, men in white caps study a list that will become trays by evening. In the harem, lessons turn pages. In the artisan quarters, a tanner lifts a hide with a hook and judges the day's patience by touch. The Grand Vizier pauses at the threshold, not to pose, but to make sure the day's first stage closes without leaving a thread to catch on a later hinge. He is not a character, he is a function. And in a city like this, performing one's function well is a form of mercy. He returns to his chambers where a small stack of papers has arrived while he was away, as if the world is eager to refill any space order. He sits, unrolls the first, and the reed pen takes up its breathing again. Outside his window, a fountain repeats the sentence it was born, to say, water finds a path. If you are still awake, let the divan's rhythm be the metronome for your breath. In petitions laid like birds on a table, out decisions tied with ribbon, in a seal warmed and impressed, out a courier walking into light. The room's domes will hold you like palms. The reed pens will count for you, and somewhere far away, a baker will weigh flour correctly, because a morning here remembered him. Water finds. A bath night at last makes a cradle of the city. The Bosporus pulls a long silver thread through everything, past the tannery's dark coins of water, past the bathhouse where steam still clings to marble, past the palace courtyards where lamps lower their small suns, and past the council hall where the last page is tied with ribbon and shelved. Istanbul breathes in domes and alleys, and the breath is even now. If you listen, the day we walked returns in soft pieces. The scrape of a knife on a wet hide becomes the sound of oars that never hurry. The tannins, tea-brown swirl, turns into the eddies along a quay where gulls fold themselves into commas and rest. Hassan's back loosens. His hands, perfumed forever with bark and river, sink into sleep as if into a vat that heals. Across the gardens, a different kind of quiet holds. In rooms tiled like a still sea, women fold the day into drawers. A lesson finished, a hem completed, a ledger balanced to the last date and coin. A girl blows out a lamp and carries the after-image of its flame beneath her eyelids. A senior attendant lays a palm on a doorpost, the way others touch a chapter. End, lightly, grateful. The harem is not a rumor in the dark anymore. It is a household that has put away its tools. Farther in, where letters took shape and decisions learned to breathe, a woman's name lingers like rosewater. Hurrem's gifts keep moving without her. Soup poured in a holy city. Hot water turning cold rooms kind. A bath that remembers shoulders and forgives them. Her life, told softly, is not a shout, but a contour proof that influence can be a hand on a latch, opening what should be open and closing what harms. And under the council's domes, reed pens sleep with their nibs wrapped, as if mouths covered against a draft. The Grand Vizier's tellus has become the Sultan's thought. Wax has cooled, seals have hardened, couriers dream the straightest road. Tomorrow, measures will be checked, bread will be weighed, guilds will argue and reconcile. Maps will be rolled, unrolled, and understood. Order here is not an accident. It is a habit kept like prayer. Let the city sounds stack themselves into a lullaby you can remember when you need it. The clapper of a night watchman, like a wooden heartbeat down a lane. The sigh a bath makes when a brazier's last coal turns from red to memory. The cat who owns 3 courtyards and reports to all of them at once. the fountain that repeats itself because truth does. Water finds a path. Water finds a path. If your mind wants pictures, give it gentler ones now. A tray of cups spaced just so, ringing once and then never again. A ledger closed with two palms, the knot tied in the middle because symmetry keeps promises better than speech. A hide lifted with a hook and judged by touch alone. A little crescent of yolk yellow light in a lattice, moving across the tile like a minute hand with manners. And if your mind wants steps, give it the steps that the city taught us, down to the water in the morning, across the golden road at noon, into the council hall when the ink is ready, back through gardens where cypress trees make the sky look taller, then home, a mat, a bowl, a folded cloth, the proof that small things make a life and keep a city from falling apart. Sleep now, if you haven't already. Istanbul will go on counting for you. Coins, loaves, signatures, prayers, until your breath and the Bosporus share a pace. When you wake, the domes will still be there, convex stories catching light. The markets will fuss kindly. The boats will write their short, foamy sentences across the strait. Somewhere, a tanner will test a finished piece and nod. Somewhere, a clerk will draw a line straighter than I thought. Somewhere, a woman will turn a key, and water will sing against stone. Water finds a path. Let yours be the easiest one, down into rest.